Hello, dear friends, and welcome to another edition of the Brattlecast. This is a fun podcast to do, and it's even more fun to listen to, as people tell us. And the reason why is because we've got stories, and the great storyteller himself is Ken Gloss, the bookseller and proprietor of the Brattle bookshop located in Boston on West Street. It's an institution. You definitely want to check it out. Lots of history, lots of fun. And today, as always, I don't know what you're going to unveil, but you have a big, looks like a scrapbook on the table.
Yeah.
Looks like it's an old edition of a scrapbook. And what's in it?
Postcards. And it's fun because postcards, I mean, they're still out. And there's a million areas of collecting that you can do with postcards. I mean, it might be your hometown. It might be pictures for costume. It might be, obviously, the remembrances of places you've been or what you've written to friends. And they're fun to look through. And I'm almost feeling a little bit with this one that my father and I, when we were in the business, always were a little bit tension just because of our different personalities. But my father used to get in large libraries. But if there was a box of postcards or there was an album of postcards, he'd always tell everybody, put that in the front seat so when I get into the store, I can look at those first. Well, I was just out in Brookline. The people had called us, said they had 10,000 books in the house. They were settling it for someone.
Wow.
Turned out they only had 5,000.
Who's counting?
They had 5,000, and we boxed up almost 200 boxes of books that you have to move and get out. But in one of the areas, I saw an album of postcards, and they said, yeah, that's part of the thing. So I put it on the front seat of my car and brought it in. And they're just, postcards can be all sorts of different things, but they can be July 4th. They can be Thanksgiving, Christmas, Halloween. And Halloween's a little rarer than some of the others because not that many people sent Halloween cards. But then you see different spaces, Easter. And there is whole areas of collecting that are just postcards.
Of course, what do I do first? I turn it over and look at what they're writing on the postcards. Yep. It says messages and there's history right here. But let's talk about what you have. Right now, is that New York or is that Boston?
Let me see what it is.
Looking at a skyscraper, that isn't...
New York.
That is New York.
That is New York. Well, there are people who collect postcards because they want, sights and scenes of their towns. There are people who collect postcards because they're holidays that they like. There's a huge amount of Christmas collecting, 4th of July collecting. There are also postcards that come out with certain artists who do them, and people like the signed artist cards. Matter of fact, recently I've gone to the Museum of Fine Arts, and one of the rooms has been whole collections of postcards. The Boston Museum bought a collection of, I think, well over 100,000 postcards from one man, and they've been putting on exhibits. And one of the things that I actually saw once that I'm not going to start collecting, but would I love to turn up someone's collection. They had probably 200 or 300 postcards of baseball stadiums. So, some of them, the older stadiums that don't exist anymore, some of them more recent, some that they take from different angles. Another style of postcards that aren't as much in this album is what they call real photo postcards, where people take the photograph themselves and then have a postcard printed up. And, you say, postcards, okay, it's a very simple area to collect. There's every in and out and intricacy. And most people there's no reason anyone would really know this, but they're deltiologists. That's the scientific name for postcard collecting.
Deltiologists.
Yeah, deltiologists.
Well, here's a point to make. The artistry in these, and I'm looking at ones from 1910, this kept a lot of artists in work, right?
Oh, yeah, and it kept a lot of printers printing. And another time I went to somebody's house. and they had 1,000 postcards of public libraries, which you wouldn't necessarily think of that initially, but it made a fascinating collection. There's also a lot of humorous postcards.
Yes.
Which you find. Now, postcards started, and it's an interesting way they started. First of all, in order to really have postcards work, you needed a very efficient, cheap postal system. Because what good would postcards do to you for like Pony Express? I mean, that was expensive. But the real first batches of postcards came out in the 1890s at the Chicago World's Fair. And that was so popular, and so many people bought these little cards, which you probably paid a penny or 2 or 5 cents for, but then you could easily mail them to friends. And all that had to come together. And then they were so popular that it just went on forever and still does.
Well, here's a question. I don't know if we know the answer to this one, but we're seeing a lot of birthdays and holidays and so forth, which for most people they think of sending a greeting card in this day and age, if people still do that. But these are quick and easy ways to say happy birthday, Merry Christmas, Happy Valentine's Day, etc.
Well, I think I just saw a Valentine's Day I can give to my wife in a few months. Actually, I used to do that every once in a while. If we got some really interesting postcards, I would save one.
But I mean, today, I don't know if that's the case. Is it the case? That
postcards? No. Postcards are, most postcards now are locations.
Wish you were here.
Wish you were here, or Niagara Falls, or whatever. But somehow there's a draw in for them that you go and you start flipping the pages and you go, oh, wow, look at that. Or you see Revere Beach, or you see a racetrack.
I'm looking at racetracks right here. Yeah. Beaches.
There were some postcards that the windows would be in sort of very clear, and you could hold them up to the light, and the windows would light up.
Oh,
that's a type of postcard collecting. And it's one of those things, like I say, I bought 200 boxes of books, and what am I looking at first? I'm looking at the postcards.
What's also interesting, and I know you look at these and study them and enjoy them, is the cursive handwriting that is so lovely from that era. I'm looking at 1900s early, and people took time to write with quills and with fountain pens and so forth.
Well, it's fun. Now, a lot of the postcard collectors like them unwritten on, but then there are people who collect them because they like what is written. And about 20 years ago, we were in Vermont, and it's interesting how the stories go. We were in Vermont, and we bought a collection of books that were almost all on roads. And the man who collected them had 2,000 acres of land in Vermont near Mount Snow, but he was very interested in 18th century coaching, horses and coaches, and he cut coaching roads in between his house and so on. In any case, he had postcards of roads and things, and we brought him into the store, and we had the box, and this one person comes in and looks at the card, and he always likes reading the back, and he goes, I know the person who sent this card, and I know who he sent it to.
Oh my
and he's going,
God.
it was like pick it out of, a random box filled with postcards, and then he started telling who this was and where that was. They were from New York. And I got a whole background story from one postcard, and
I would venture to say that every one of these cards that has a personal meaning and message has just that kind of background story. Obviously, here's one. May I just
sure.
pop this up for a second? This one caught my eye. No matter from what country you are, ain't it H blank blank, probably standing for hell, to be poor. And what's interesting about this one, let's look at the date, 1910. Picture of Uncle Sam in the middle and some savory characters holding their empty pockets open.
Well, that was a very political.
That's what I'm thinking.
Exactly, and they have political postcards and.
Uncle Pete, never be afraid to own up to the truth. Signed, John.
Yeah. And another thing, another aspect of postcards that can be a lot of fun is figuring out where they are. In other words, if you get a postcard of Europe, now I'll continue that story. There was a very famous time where Cupid dolls were and sunbonnet. There was a whole series of sunbonnet babies, and this card is a sunbonnet baby card. But sometimes you get a card, and it might be a European town or city, but it says so-and-so square or at so-and... Well, a lot of times it can be quite an effort to figure out where these places are. And we had one customer who started collecting postcards, and it turned into this huge library of European guidebooks, European maps, because he wanted to figure out. And with all the country changes and the names, they didn't, he'd make trips and pilgrimages all based on his postcard collection.
Well, okay. Though this does tell us where it is. Asbury Park, which is the Jersey Shore.
Right, but just think if somebody from Europe had gotten that card, and then you'd say, where's Asbury Park?
Yeah,
Now,
and there was no Google at that time.
there was no Google. Or one of the examples I say, and maybe a lot of people who hear this, if you got a postcard that just said Scully Square. Now, if you didn't know or were from Boston, that's a very famous area of Boston. But if it just said Scully Square, and let's say you were in Japan or in Europe, you'd go, where is Scully Square? And that's what a lot of people do, is try to track down where the card is from.
1908.
Yep.
And it's that era, and looking at the beach, and of course most of the men on the beach are wearing tops and bottoms. Most of the women are wearing long dresses, even on the beach. It's amazing. It really is. It's a capture of history in that one shot.
And then you can get into, like I say, when you go from postcards, another fascinating area, and this is an area where postcards are starting to get really valuable, is gay. There aren't many postcards, but I know I had one from Florida. It was probably a 1950s card, the Ooh La La Club. It was all men dressed in drag.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong, but it makes a fabulous collection if you can put together a collection like that. Because, now you look at it and go, it was a little bit of sign of the times, but it's a fascinating how they were dressed and what they were wearing, and the fact that they were to the point of putting out a postcard saying how proud they were of this.
And do we know offhand about parts of the world? I mean, the postcards in Europe, obviously, postcards in maybe Mexico or whatever. But I mean, Asia? Do we?
Oh, sure. Japan in particular has loads of very beautiful postcards going back a long way. All through Southeast Asia, you can get them. Mm-hmm. And also, too, the ones that are most common, well, in the United States, the biggest cities town, the Grand Tour. In other words, the Central Europe, Italy, France, Great Britain, Germany, and cards of the museums and so on that people would bring back. But the more you get off the beaten path, the rarer the cards are, because less people went to those areas.
One more question. Let's see. Can we tell how much these cost to send? Most of these would be just a couple of pennies, right? In those days.
Well, what did they? Many of them were called penny postcards.
Penny postcards. There you go.
And some of them you could buy almost with a pre-stamp, a postage on them too. But
that's another thing too. Boy, there's more stuff coming out all the time. 1 cent stamp. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And these are stamps that are, of course, been stamped by the post office, but it's kind of interesting to see. A lot of them are from the same book of stamps, I think.
Yeah. Well, and also generally the stamps are not particularly valuable because there were so many of them sent. Right. And then you can get to what the people are writing on them. And one of the most moving cards that I had to do in one of the appraisals that I did on Antiques Roadshow. And it was during World War II when this 17, 18-year-old girl was writing to her parents from one of the work camps. They had taken her out and then sent her to one of essentially slave labor camps. and she wanted. They actually got, that people don't realize, in some of the work camps, they actually would let people out into the town under escort, and they could write home. And I one time got a postcard in that, and I was thinking, I can't imagine being in a position where you were in one of those camps and had to send something to your family, or being the family and having one of your children in those postcards. And she was upbeat because I think she wanted her parents to feel good. But first of all, a lot of people don't realize that there was some mail sent out, and that can be incredibly moving. And I think the family who I saw has it, and they're probably going to put it in a museum at some place.
Some would scoff at this and think, oh, it's just old stuff, who cares? But you and I just spent 15, 18 minutes talking about the value beyond just the paper it's printed on. It's the meaning, it's the messaging, and it's the history.
Yeah, and the other thing about postcards that's great, there are lots and lots of them. Most of them are relatively cheap, so you don't have to be, quote, a millionaire to buy, anything. And it's an area where almost anywhere you go, anywhere, there are going to be postcards that you can find, and it makes a nice search.
All part of what happens on a daily basis at the Brattle Bookshop. This man is on the go, on the run, when he's not in the store, discovering treasures and sharing them with us on the Brattlecast. Ken, as always, thank you. I want to remind people it's brattlebookshop.com for all kinds of additional information, and once you get hooked, you will not be able to stop yourself, as I am a testament to.
And one of the nice things about this is that I got to pick this up and take it home. I still have to move 200 boxes of books, but that's another aspect of the buy.
Which is why he looks like Jack LaLanne in his prime, folks, I'll tell you. Ken, thank you so much.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you.
It's fun.